We have this effort by non-Muslims to reform Islam. So I just really want to quickly go over one of their main strategies for attacking Muslims and attacking Islam and calling for reform. And one of the things that they do that's very sneaky actually, and Muslims need to be aware of this, is they point to abuse within the Muslim community, whether it's abuse between husband and wife, abuse through parents and children, abuse through an imam and his congregation, or a teacher and his students. And so they point to these kinds of examples to want to show that Muslim institutions and relationships are dysfunctional. And their whole rhetorical strategy is to say that, look, Muslims, because they're following Islam, because they're following the Quran and these very specific roles and responsibilities and this hierarchy, that this is causing dysfunction within the Muslim community. So we need to dissolve these institutions. We need to dissolve these hierarchies, and that will result in freedom and equality for Muslims. And that's why Muslims need to accept these reforms that we are implementing. And you see it throughout the Muslim world recently when it comes to like triple talaq, in India, when it comes to Tunisia and equal inheritance between men and women. So many examples of reform, and it's always the same kind of idea that some kinds of abuse or exploitation exists, and that justifies reforming the law. The reality, however, is that all laws, all kinds of hierarchies between people, rules and responsibilities can result in exploitation. And it doesn't matter if it's Islamic law, it doesn't matter if it's Western law. Any legal system has this kind of ability where a person who has bad intentions can exploit the law in order to take advantage of people, or exploit his position of authority to take advantage of those who are below him. And the difference is that Western institutions ignore the violations within their own institutions. They ignore the violations within their structures of hierarchy, or they say this is, a few bad apples, but the institution as a whole is not a problem. Right? So when it comes to police brutality or the abuse of power within the police force, no one says that we need to abolish the police force. No one says that we need to destroy this institution or that this institution is inherently dysfunctional. No, they say it's just a few bad apples. Or look at the whole system of Western government within this idea of secular democracy, representational democracy. There's so much corruption. There is so much illegality, immorality that is taking place in these institutions. No one says we need to dissolve them. No one says that we need to just reform them and come up with something new. They just say, well, these are a few bad apples, and what are you gonna do? Like, there's always gonna be bad people. But they don't have that kind of attitude when it comes to Muslims. They don't have that kind of attitude when it comes to Islamic law. Rather, they say, no, the law itself has to be changed, and has to be reformed, and has to be restructured, and there can't be any hierarchy, there can't be rules and responsibilities. But they don't say that when it comes to Western institutions. No one says that, well, the idea of a president, right, or a senator or a congressman, the idea of a judge, the idea of a police officer who has this kind of authority and can enforce his authority, that needs to be liquidated. But they do say that about imams. They do say that about the husband who is in Islam has the authority as the head of the household. They do say that about the idea of an emir, a religious leader. So they are using this idea of exploitation to dissolve and liquidate all of these important hierarchical relationships within Muslim institutions. So we have to recognize this kind of trick, and if we recognize it, then we can push back against it. And the thing is that we don't have to deny that abuse exists, right? Because there are a small percentage of husbands who are dirtbags or imams who do commit violations of their trust. That exists. We don't have to deny it, but that doesn't mean that we have to do away with the role of the imam, with the role of the husband, with the authority that those positions have. No, we say the same thing that the West would say when they're defending their own institutions. There are some bad apples, but our tradition already has the mechanisms in place to deal with that and to take care of that kind of illegality. So this is something that we should keep in mind. Recognize that any law that's in place can be taken advantage of, but the legal system from Allah, the ethics that God, the Creator, Allah has sent to humanity takes into account human nature. And that's why it is superior to other systems of law that do not take into account human nature, because they're not from the Creator. They're not God revealed, divinely revealed, rather they're man-made, and so they're imperfect in that way. If we have this kind of framing in mind, inshallah, then we avoid some of these strategies in trying to get Muslims to reform Islamic law, and we can see straight past them, inshallah.